Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I'm here. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Crap, stupid rumble. My name is Brian Martinez, and I'm joined by my co-host Hannah Wallen and Lauren Brooks. I don't know why I spaced on that. So I'm sorry, Lauren. You are a valued member of this team. I just had like a brain fart and everything just disappeared for a moment. I had a Joe moment. So what are we doing here?
I won't hold your farts against you.
Yeah. But welcome
You gotta
to
catch them first.
Yeah, good luck with that. Or sword fight with them. And welcome to HBR Talk, where we have Hannah and Lauren on to discuss various topics. Normally the setup is all Hannah's business, but for now, because she's kind of going through a bunch of things, I'm going to be running the show as producer and stream manager or czar or whatever you want to call it. And today we're going to be going through the second half, I think it's the second half, or maybe not, of an article put out by the New Yorker entitled How Toxic is Masculinity? And it talks about, essentially, it's an article that I think essentially makes recommendations for feminist books or feminist writings on the subject of masculinity, which includes toxic masculinity. You guys probably have noticed that in terms of feminist discourse online and in boardrooms and political spheres, the phrase of toxic masculinity has basically come into the mainstream. It's left the academia towers, where it was talked about with a bunch of people that love the smell of their own farts, speaking of farts, and now it's basically entered HR departments and corporate boardrooms and our advertising and our stories and our culture. It's basically everywhere, which means that we should understand what that's going to mean, how it can be used to harm men and how it exists to harm men, basically. And hopefully we'll find some tools to better combat it. So just calling it bullshit, though, seems to be a good place to start from. All right. So anyway, do you guys remember, I think this is where we left off, where we were talking about, they mentioned some of the books. So for example, two recent books, A History of Masculinity, From Patriarchy to Gender Justice, and a French historian wrote a book called, that was the French historian named Ivan Jablanka, and then someone named Nina Power wrote a book called What Do Men Want? Masculinity and Its Discontents. And of course, this is all philosophical and, that kind of thing. So I thought we would keep going, and when the ladies want to jump in and make some commentary on the article, then I'll just shut up. So if you guys could, please smash the like button right now so that more people will potentially see the stream.
I mean, I would like my internet to.
Yes, Lauren? What were you saying? You dropped. Uh-oh. Lauren might be having some connection issues, I think. We'll see if she resolves them.
Yeah, no, the moment is past. Don't worry about it. Go ahead.
All right.
No, I'm here.
All right.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'm here. It feels like I can hear you. There's a delay.
Yes, there's a delay. I'm figuring this out right now. Go ahead.
Actually, I think Lauren, Doge isn't lighting up with the delay. I think you might have the stream open in another window. I don't know.
Lauren, are you watching the stream instead of talking with us in the Discord and responding to me talking on the stream? All right. Well, if we need to, I could move this to Zoom. And if you guys are okay with that, I could just send you Zoom invites. If we need to.
Yeah, if it fixes the problem. Like, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. Lauren says no. Okay, so she's not doing that. But she is having some connection problems. Yeah, I don't know. And now Allison's asking me questions that I can't answer right now because I'm hosting a show, Allison. So, all right. Let me do that. I'm going to open up Zoom. I think it'll just work better. I hope. My only hope is that you guys have it installed.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let me just do that. I'm going to hang up here and I'm going to send you guys an invite in just a second. So just to make sure that this works, guys, bear with me. The Discord it's been pretty crap lately. So it might be a good idea for us to just use Zoom more regularly. So, all right, I just dropped them a link to it. I think that this will work. Just give me a moment. I apologize. Let's just see if this is good. All right, there goes. All right, cool. Someone named Desktop is connecting the audio. I don't know anyone by that name. And they dropped out. Okay. Check to make sure that they're not telling me something somewhere else. I am again. Apologize for this. Okay, Hannah's coming. All right. Connecting. Just a moment, y'all. All right, Hannah, you there? Oh, she's still trying to get the audio working. Shouldn't be too
Honey
much
Badger
trouble.
Radio has Allison's picture on it.
Yeah, I know.
With the big glasses, those are so cute.
Yeah, that's the account I use on Zoom. So it's got a picture of Allison on it. It's her account. But she paid for the premium Zoom so that we can have longer calls and also more people. Because I think that if you have a free account, it limits like how long you can chat for and how many people you can have in the chat at once. So we're just waiting now on Lauren.
Lauren just said Zoom is having her do an update.
That's okay.
She's in Discord.
All right.
So it
and
might
also,
just be a minute.
It's probably a good idea for you to hang up in Discord if you're in Zoom, because that might mess with your audio. And I see that you're still in the live show chat.
Yeah, that's how I could hear Lauren. Okay, so since Lauren can't hear Brian and Brian can't hear Lauren, Lauren said that Zoom is asking her to do an update, so she's gonna have to do an update before she can come in. And Brian said I need to hang up from the live show because it's messing with my audio. So I'm gonna hang up from the live show, and I guess Lauren probably will pop in when she can.
And then she can just tell us, like, if she's having an issue with the update, she can just tell us.
Yeah.
All right. So it looks like Lauren hung up as well, and you can just see how she's doing in the chat. Okay, and here comes Lauren. So yeah, I told you it's not that big of a deal. Just waiting on Zoom to let her in, and you can already tell that the audio is better, at least like because like it's not cutting people off when we talk over each other, which is something that Discord does. It's kind of annoying, and the connection seems more stable. Let's hope that it is for Lauren as well. Because
Yeah.
it's connecting her to the audio. Lauren, are you there? Lauren. Let's see. All right. Lauren. Lauren is connecting to audio. Is she on her phone?
No, it takes you when you come in, it takes you through a thing where you test your audio and your microphone.
Camera.
And
Yeah,
I
your
went through
microphone.
it just to make sure because
I
my
have
computer
to
likes to.
unmute.
No, there you are. We hear you now.
Hello. All right.
Yeah, we hear you now. All right.
There we go.
All right. So yeah, I guess Discord was being a bitch. So we're gonna have to do Zoom for this one. All right, let's get into the article. So, Jablonka's defense. So Jablonka, I believe, is another author that was referenced earlier. Jablonka's dense, copiously researched book, which became a surprise bestseller in France when it was published there in 2019, takes an ambitious key to all mythologies approach to its subject. Jablonka, who is a professor at the Université Sorbonne Paris Nord, whatever, begins in the Upper Paleolithic, examining its mysterious corpulent Venus figurines, and moves suavely across the millennia all the way to the successive waves of modern feminism. He has an eye for striking, often grim details. Under the Babylonian code of Hammurabi, a daughter might be killed as punishment for a murder committed by her father, and relishes drawing parallels across eras. From ancient times to the present day, it seems, the central totems of masculinity, weapons, locomotive vehicles, and meat, particularly rare meat, that's interesting that they're associating meat with masculinity, have remained remarkably consistent. Likewise, from the fall of Rome to the Weimar Republic, of course, that's men, right? Yeah. Men have consistently attributed political disaster and cultural decline to the corrupting influence of feminine values.
So what we're looking at here is, again, and feminists do this all the time, right? If there are laws that unfairly apply to women or impose unfair standards or penalties or obligations, restrictions, whatever on women, that's patriarchy. But if the same thing happens with men, they either ignore it or they say, well, patriarchy hurts men too. So when it happens to women, it happens because they're women. But when it happens to men, even though they make this argument that all of these factors are hallmarks of masculinity or markers of masculinity, or his language, central totems of masculinity. So in other words, men are unfairly punished for things because they're expected to be tough and strong and powerful and accountable and all that. And that's patriarchy. But the expectations are placed on them for the benefit of women and children, right? And this concept is really just a way of demonizing men and demonizing masculinity by attributing all things that are bad to masculinity and all things victimhood to femininity.
Yep, that's correct. And you can always go in history, because I wouldn't be surprised if this was the case. The author of this book that she's referencing is cherry picking like whatever is most useful to the ultimate narrative that has to be sent out, which is exactly what Hannah just described. So they say, under the Babylonian code of Hammurabi, a daughter might be killed as punishment for a murder committed by her father. See, that sounds awful, but the way that it's worded already suggests a bunch of things that are being left out, because that law or practice or whatever it needs to be focused on. So, you would probably want to ask more questions like, Are there any Babylonian codes of Hammurabi where men are expected to carry more of the burden and therefore take on more of the responsibility?
Right.
Well,
under
or even
what
just
under what
is
conditions?
the man's son also killed?
Yeah,
Was this
yeah.
complaint because the daughter wasn't excluded from the standard, or was this complaint because the daughter was the sole burden carrier of that standard? Because a lot of times when you look at these laws, the complaint is women were also included in the drawbacks of a particular law, not women were the sole targets of the law.
Yes. And that's important because again, like they cherry pick this specific example and then they say this is what life was like in this period. Just like when they mention the corpulent Venus figurines. But like what is it supposed to be? Oh, are they saying that, you know, we had these Venus figurines, they're talking about the really old fertility goddesses, right?
Right.
So is this an argument that that's objectification? Because like they don't even, have you noticed that feminists don't even necessarily have to make a definitive argument anymore? They can just imply that there's something sinister about, say, the existence of Venus figurines. So, and then they let you fill in the blanks. And if you're already inclined to think of women as like, you know, objects, chattel, like whatever, then they don't even have to make the argument. They can just say, this is how it was in history. And because so many normies think that patriarchy has, like, at the very least, always existed for 99% of human history,
right.
Well, then they don't actually have to make a case.
About this. You argue with them about this, like they say, oh, and the corpulent Venus figurines, and you say, well, what about the corpulent Venus figurines? What's the complaint? You don't get, well, here's what the complaint was. You get, oh my God, it's just so exhausting arguing with someone who just doesn't get it, you know, or something like that. You wouldn't understand. You're a agent of the patriarchy. Oh, your internalized misogyny is showing. Like, no actual answer, no actual information, nothing to address, nothing to agree with, nothing to disagree with. Just, you're supposed to take that vague inference and that reference as meaning something and be upset about it.
It's also useful for them to do this because they can use the Mott and Bailey as a defense. So if you say, I think I know what you're trying to suggest with these Venus statues or figurines, and here's why I disagree, then they can, because they never made a definitive, clear argument, they can like back off into something else. Oh, you're reading into this way too much. It's not that serious, dude. You know, which they
never said what the complaint was.
Yeah. Why did you assume that? Must be something going on in your brain. You told me more about what you think than, you know, it's just so, it's so
dishonest.
Yeah. It's very manipulative. All right. So anywho, so then they mention the fall of Rome and the Weimar Republic. Again, this is all about correlating, even if they don't, and this is another Mott and Bailey thing. So if you call them out on it and say, why are you using the Weimar Republic as your primary example of cultural decline that is blamed on feminine values? Well, because they want to associate Nazis with men, with masculinity itself. But like, well, not only does that not really make sense according to history, because a lot of women in Germany supported the Nazis, but it also really shouldn't even need to be sort of phrased as a masculine feminine thing, even though like socialism is generally more feminine, and it is like a more like, you know, more security, you know, welfare, etc. But even then, I personally wouldn't try to draw that connection, but they do, because they want you to see the masculine as inherently tyrannical, basically.
I mean, these people are so unaware of anything that they don't realize, the very same men that you're criticizing and laying blame to, they're going to be the very same men that you're going to need when the shit hits the fan. And it's coming very soon. And I don't think that I think they live in the here and now. They don't really understand the immediate future. And, I think a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. So it's kind of like, you just do whatever you have to do to get by. But, if you're discarding these men, then when you run out of what you need and you're going to be looking around for someone to help you, and when you can't fix something around your house and what are you going to do? You spent the last however long of your life shitting on men. And now what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You probably alienated any guy around you who would actually want to come in and help you. But they don't, people don't think that way. I don't know.
A lot of women like this don't. But like eventually, yeah, like you said, the suffering comes. And when the suffering comes, I think most women, when they have exhausted all of their girl power shit and realize that nothing is improving, they're going to be begging men for help. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of men will still help.
Yeah,
they will show up to open up those pickle jars and make sure that the air conditioning is working and all these other luxuries, right? And it's true. And those women, they may or may not actually be transformed by that experience, because some of them may realize, you know what, I've been really shitty to men for most of my life, and now I realize how good they are. But I think a lot of them will simply take that for granted. Well, that's what you should be doing as a man. That's the bare minimum that we want. That's the bare minimum that we should expect. Right. And, men who don't want anything to do with any of that, I can't blame them at all.
Yeah, these are the same women that will crow about how they're a strong, independent woman that don't need no man. They're men are an inconvenience in their lives. They wish that they could have more all female, only female spaces. They don't want men telling them how to do things. They don't want men telling them any advice of any kind, and they don't want men being in charge of anything. But the moment they have a problem that is beyond their scope, the first thing, where are all the men? Why aren't the men doing something about this? And it's if they have to deal with a guy who is violent, if they have to deal with a bad guy, where are all the good guys? Well, you chased them away, honey. Mm-hmm. They aren't going to come near you. You told them they were unwanted. You told them they were an inconvenience. You played victim of their existence, so they're not around anymore. Yep. Sorry.
You passed them over because they were too soft. They were too good. You wanted the bad boy. So now you got the bad boy and you want someone to come save you? Sorry, no. You gotta save yourself.
Yeah. The rescue has been delayed indefinitely. Yeah. Pick up your own damn shit.
It is actually an opportunity for women to learn to actually be self-sustaining, but they probably won't take advantage of it. So,
well, those women won't. That's
yeah,
for
I'm
sure.
saying those women won't. All right. Jablanka's thesis about how patriarchy arose is a fairly standard one. Paleolithic societies already had a sexual division of labor. Spanish cave paintings from as early as 10,000 BC show male archers hunting and women gathering honey. But it was relatively benign.
Whoa. Wait a minute, right there. So, Spanish cave paintings show male archers going out and doing something that is incredibly dangerous, and women doing something that you can come up with ways to protect yourself from any danger while you're doing it, right? And it was relatively benign. Why? because men took on the burden of facing the potential consequences of the more dangerous, difficult, dirty, dismal, and sometimes degrading. Sometimes there are things that happen when you're hunting that are really, really not fun. Like you have to examine an animal's shit to figure out if it's the right kind of animal. And they took on those burdens so women didn't have to. So it's benign because bad things happen to men, but not women. It's no longer benign to these feminists if women are not excluded from bad things happening. Just got to point that out.
Yeah, no. And again, like they're saying the existence of sexually I don't like the way she phrases this. The existence of a division of labor based on sex, men and women, that is patriarchy to her. So I think that's where she's headed, because obviously if we lived in caves and honest to God, okay, if you watch the show, I think I've brought this up before and I apologize if you've heard me say this a million times, but if you ever want to see, the division of labor happen organically, because it's just the reality, watch any of those survival shows where they have like a group of people of different genders mixed together. Not the ones where they segregate, because I know about those, but where you have like some men and some women, and they're basically, it's a reality show. They're in a survival situation. Naked and Afraid does this, but it's probably not the only show. And you will see in most cases, women will become gatherers and men will become hunters. And that's like the best. They're not even like, it's not like someone showed up and said, as a man, I think we should be hunting. No, they just automatically fall in line, because when there's nothing else, like you're like literally naked in the middle of the jungle with nothing but like the one tool they let you take, okay? The men are gonna tend towards a certain kind of behavior for survival purposes, and the women are gonna tend towards another one. So is that patriarchy? Is that like a system of oppression? Or is that just men and women knowing what their strengths are? And these are not like weak women, like they're, they're athletic. They might live on a farm and work really hard. They might be ex-military or cops. So I'm not even like, dissing them, but I'm saying that it doesn't really matter that much if you're in a survival situation, because even if you're a woman with like a history or a knowledge of that kind of stuff, there are also men in the same group that also have backgrounds that are similar, and they're men. So they're like, they just know, what needs to be done. And they generally take those risks. Like the men that get kicked off the show, they usually end up that way because they get sick. They are poisoned. They've gone too long without eating because they prioritize feeding everyone else over themselves. So like, this is just nature. That's what I'm getting at. This is just nature showing itself when, so if you haven't seen it, check out some of those TV shows and notice the way the women act and the way the men act. And if they're being practical and they're not being like, like girl power ideologues, of which there have been a couple of episodes where there's like some feminist woman on there and she wants to prove herself, but she doesn't generally make it, or she ends up changing her ways and just basically does what she's told. You will occasionally see that, but most of the time these are not whiners. These are people who are capable, but the women are like, this is what I should be doing. So
it really, it just sucks. It's like, why do you have to view what you contribute to the society or to the group as any less or better than the other one, right? Like, if you come to the group and all you can do is hunt and gather, well, be the best hunt and gatherer you can. You know what I mean? You should take pride in what you do because you're contributing to the group. And there's somewhere where we lost that. It's like I have to prove myself as this thing, but it's like everybody doesn't have to be the best at everything. Sometimes you're the best hunter-gatherer. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's
Right.
not how women view the world. It's I gotta be number one, and if I'm not the
Or they don't want anyone to stand out. That's
yeah,
it's another thing, is that they don't want anyone to be like exceptional because they're afraid it'll hurt the feelings of some of the others. And this
right.
happens with it happens with men too, because like when I watch these survival shows, you'll see like a dude, and the men generally that get the most emotional and upset are the men who actually try to take on too much. So they're basically
Yeah.
like, oh, I want to provide. I really want. And then there's like another guy who's like, you know, there was this one series where you had like a guy, and he wanted to bring home the bacon once. He wanted to like successfully hunt something, and it was like a big fucking deal for him, right? He was obsessing over it. And the reason, I think, is because he felt like by not doing that, he wasn't living up to a standard of manhood that he had put on himself. And there was another man in the same group that was like, he was either really lucky or he was just super Chad guy, because he like caught like a, you know, an electric eel or something, and they were you know, he fed everyone like at least once or twice. There was another guy who like brought, like, he caught like I don't know, antelope or an emu or something, like a big fucking deer from like Africa. And everyone was so thrilled, right? Because they were all starving. And of course, this guy, he's so bothered by the fact that he wasn't able to catch anything. Like, he would go fishing and come back with little bitty fish or nothing at all. And so it was really bothering him, but it wasn't like an ego thing. It wasn't like he needed to prove that he was better than the other men. It was really because he felt like, because he wasn't able to, like, you know, catch anything successfully. And he was
He
like,
felt like he wasn't holding up his end of the piano.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
He
exactly.
felt like he was in a group of men carrying a heavy load, and he wasn't holding up his end of the load. And you know, from a real life situation that is not something off television, because people will always say, well, that stuff's all staged. But I
Mhm.
think a lot of it, the people's reactions, the feelings they display in it, not staged. The challenges, yeah, totally staged. The people's behavior, not necessarily.
Yeah.
But I worked in a lot of different environments, and there was one I worked in where there was a combination of different types of labor, and one of them was unloading the supply truck. And from, you know, the cashier to the manager to the cook, everybody unloaded the supply truck, right? And I worked with a guy. We were close to the same size. I was actually slightly taller, and probably outweighed him just a little bit. And we were both carrying stuff off the truck. And one of the things that you carry is it's called a bag of the box. And if you've ever worked anywhere that sells soda fountain drinks, that's, you know what I'm talking about. But for those that don't, the syrup that gets mixed with the soda water to make your pop when you get pop out of a soda fountain, or soda for everybody that's not from Ohio, you it's in one part of the machine, and it's literally in a bag
Yeah.
that's contained in a cardboard box, and it has a hookup that you hook up to the machine, and it runs that through one line, and it runs the soda water through another line, and they combine in the machine to make your pop. And it comes in different sizes. We always got two different sizes. There was the big 50-pound bag in the box, which we got like things like Pepsi and Coke and Mountain Dew would come in the big 50-pounder, because people buy a lot of that stuff, right? And then the less popular types of pop would come in 15-pound smaller bags in the box. Well, obviously, if you can carry one 50-pound bag in the box, you can lift 3 15-pound bags in the box, because that's, you know, that's pretty close there. It's just about 5 pounds difference, and it's still less. The only problem with it is cardboard doesn't stick to cardboard. So it's kind of slidey. And so I would lift 2 of them, which, that's 30 pounds. That's not bad. And you can carry that without a risk of throwing your back out trying to keep the top box from sliding off to the left or right. It's a pretty tall stack. It gets away from your arms, right? So the guy I'm working with, and he always acknowledged seeing me as a hard worker and everything. But and I've told this story before, but I've talked to him since I told the story. And I talked to him about that moment one time, and he's like, well, there's one bit you didn't know about. But he ended up having to pick up 3 of the 15-pounders and try to carry them. And I had to say something about it. I was like, I noticed they're sliding on top, the 3rd box. If you pick up 3 boxes, you're going to end up trying to balance it. And the shifting weight, you're going to hurt your back. And I'm like, I've already hurt my back in the past. I'm going to tell you, don't risk that. Even though you can, and even though maybe you could lift 4 of them, it's dangerous and it's not a good idea. So he went back down to 2 and we got it done in quick order. But one of the other gals had razzed him about not being able to lift more than me because he was a dude and he should be able to. And I had to say to him, don't take that shit. That's bullshit. She's not lifting even 2. Right. So it doesn't matter if you're lifting more than me or not. Don't do something dangerous because some dumb chick can't figure out that you're doing more than she is and she has no room to talk. Right. And that is something that happens to men all the time. Women who are not doing more. Well, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you doing more? Right. Well, you know what? Yeah, I can put my arms on either side of 2 boxes and keep them from shifting all over the place. And the posture I have keeps them from shifting forward. But if I put a 3rd box on top, then I'm going to be twisting my back left and right with a 45-pound weight trying to keep from losing part of it. And that's dumb. And you shouldn't have to explain that. But as a guy, you often do have to explain that. Mm-hmm. And I think in a lot of situations, men end up going out and doing things for the group that they're taking on a higher risk because they know that's expected of them. And because they know that there are women in the group that will castigate them and make fun of them. When in reality, they are contributing, right? Going out and fishing, even if you're not able this day or that day to bring back, if you're not the one that brings back the food, you still went out for it. And if the left side of the fishing net holds more fish, it doesn't mean the right side of the fishing net was useless. It means you cast a wide net. And because you were able to cast a wide net, you got food. And this situation here with this description of patriarchy, I think feminists are doing the thing where they're criticizing the segments of the net where the food didn't land. They're criticizing men for being the ones to wield the net, when in fact women were never going to step up and do it themselves.
Right. Yep. And like if you're in like a Paleolithic society where they've already decided what the division of labor is going to be, women don't have to worry about that because they have a job. And the men don't have to worry about what the women are doing because they have a job too. And the assumption is if both groups do their job, then we'll all eat. Exactly. And that's good. So, all right. From in the Neolithic era, with the advent of agriculture and the move away from nomadic existence, birth rates increased and women became confined to the domestic sphere, while men started to own land. Well, wait, they didn't just own land. They were responsible for land.
They defended land, and they defended the people on that land too. That's another thing that people don't think about. And it wasn't just from other men. There was a point in time where defending that land was defending that land from predatory animals as well. And they're defending that land from the weather, and they've been defending that land from the weather for hundreds of years. And we have whole areas of engineering that have been developed just for the purpose of defending that land and the people on that land from nature.
Yep. So yeah, again, this is another thing where the feminists leave things out, or they, edit their sentences and make their statements with basically the expectation that you're too stupid to ask these questions. Like, men just had land. Like, it was just like a patch of grass, and they had like a flag with their family crest on it, and they were like, this is mine, and that's it. Right? That's not what it is. I mean, some guy could probably do that, but it's not going to benefit him, because if you don't use the land to build something, no one's going to want to be there. So, again, we're talking about the agricultural change in the way that, we lived. So moved away from nomadic existence, right? Men started to own land. From then on, each new development, be it metal weapons, the rise of the state, or even the birth of writing, further entrenched the power of men and the subjugation of women. Until now, that is. Oh, did someone want to say anything about the last claim that she's making?
And she just claims that women were subjugated, but she has not actually offered any evidence that women are subjugated. Right. What she's done is what this writer has done, and what this Jablonka he is being attributed as having done, is a gish gallop of things that are not evidence of anything in and of themselves. They're just being all combined together to create an impression, and it just comes across like the litany of things rattled off by Chunk in Goonies when he's got his hand in the blender and they're like, tell us everything from the beginning, and he starts talking about bad things he did in elementary school. It's not of any value or use or any weight. It doesn't carry any weight in terms of understanding what this person is talking about. It's drivel. It's literal drivel. There is drivel in the New Yorker. That's 2022 in a nutshell.
Yep. Okay. So, and also, yeah, again, each new development. So first, metal weapons. Well, why did men need to make metal weapons? Why do you think that is? Again, do you think that guys just like swords because they're cool? I don't think so. And
how are women victims of that?
Yeah, and how does that harm women? I mean, I think that the suggestion is, again, they're never going to actually make a claim or a statement directly. So the suggestion is that men made weapons because they like to make war for fun. Women are harmed in the crossfire of that. Not men made weapons because it could help them hunt food better, it could help them protect their homes, it could help them against invading armies. No, it's none of that. It's just that men like swords, and they just think they're cool because they think so little of them, that why would someone go through the trouble of engineering metal weapons and all the work that contains if it's just because look at my cool sword?
Yeah, and in all honesty, if you think men did that just for fun, go to a Renaissance fair and watch somebody actually work in a forge, because there's almost always now some blacksmith that has a makeshift forge at a Ren fair, and just go and watch them work and see if you think that was just something that men came up with for fun.
Yeah, because they think swords are cool. Swords are in fact pretty cool. I'm not saying that they're not. But I'm saying that I think that at the time that they were developing these weapons, it's essentially a technological race, right? To see who's going to stay on top. But I
stepped on Lauren, so you gotta let her talk too.
Oh, sorry, Lauren. I didn't hear you. Go ahead.
No. I wasn't gonna bring up anything major. I was just gonna say, they regard it as little boys just playing with their toys, right? When there actually is value in what they're doing, right? But it's just, let's just toss it aside because men like it. And it must just be silly. Yeah,
and they needed it again. Like if you didn't have if you were still like running around with like stone spears to protect your tribe, which includes the women and children, and some invading force comes in and they have like, you know, metal, like iron or steel weapons, you're screwed. They probably have shields, they probably have armor. And so like the reality is the world is not a nice place. And you know, the people all through history have had to like have that keep their eye on not just neighboring tribes, but roving barbarians and predatory animals and other things that could essentially take away what they have. So it's just living in reality. But like women, like the feminists that wrote this article, they're so far removed from that. They not just because they probably live in a very comfortable major metropolis, but like even in that space, they're so far removed from the dangers of the world that they could not, they just think that you can live in a world where no one ever fights anyone. And that's just not real. Like that's that's just a fantasy.
It's actually like one of the ultimate expressions of privilege when feminists talk as though men could just unilaterally, individually decide that violence is not going to happen and there will be no violence, right? Because in reality, there has always been from prior to the evolution of human life, there's always been, and you can still see it in the animal world today, violence as a part of the resource acquisition process. Whenever a life form doesn't cultivate its own resources, right? So humans cultivate our own resources now, and we're going through the growing pain of recognizing we can cultivate our own resources. We don't need to use violence to take land and resources away from each other. If we work smarter, we don't have to work harder, right? That's what our civilization is evolving through right now. But in the history of our evolution, we did not have that option. That was something that when our ancestors were dumb animals, just came to them naturally and was part of them being life forms. And that instinct is it's not something that's just going to like, oh, hey, we can farm now. Instinct gone. You know, that's not how instinct works. And you can see it manifesting in humans in early childhood. You know, and this is like the first exposure I had to it, where I was aware that I was being exposed exactly to that, was the Halloween night mugging that my brother and our friend and I experienced, where we were going through our neighborhood and we started hearing from the other kids that there were high schoolers, which they were freshmen, 14-year-old and 15-year-old freshmen that were mugging little kids that were out by themselves for their candy. And this was our first year going out without an adult, because I was 12 and our friend was 11. So it was okay that, no, I was 9. I'm sorry, I was 11 and our friend was 10. My brother was 9. It was okay that my 9-year-old brother was out without an adult because he was with his 11-year-old sister, right? Because the adults didn't expect high schoolers to be mugging the kids for candy. And once we knew that was happening, and we were in an area of the neighborhood where we couldn't, like, going straight home actually wasn't an option. There were going to be twists and turns to get us home. And we were going to be going through two areas, one of two areas that pretty much they had staked out as their territory. And if they knew that we had made effort to escape them, in our neighborhood, we knew that that was a show of weakness, and we knew that they would come after us later. So I was there for the boys deciding, and these are like I said, a 9-year-old boy and a 10-year-old boy had a conversation and decided we're going to have to face down this fight, because if we don't face down this fight, we're going to have a worse one later on. And they argued whether or not to deal with the worst one to protect me from having to deal with it. and came to the conclusion that this type of bully, because as we knew who the boys were that were attacking the kids, this type of bully doesn't omit girls. So they'd come after all three of us. So they couldn't even protect me by taking the brunt of a worse fight later on. And that's when they made that decision. And I contributed to the discussion and everything, but I really wasn't the deciding factor. All right, because there were three of us, and in a democracy, the majority vote wins. And so the decision was, we're just gonna keep going the way that we're going. If we turn around and chicken out, we're all screwed. So we're gonna have to fight this fight. And then they decided how to protect me. And I kept saying, I'm the oldest. I should be protecting you guys. No, you're the girl. And that's how it went too. They walked on either side of me. And they were hoping that would prevent me from getting caught up in the fight. It didn't, but my brother ended up breaking a high school kid's nose to protect me that night. Kid had dragged me down the street by my candy, and my brother came pounding down the sidewalk, and I'm like on the ground because I had wrapped my bag of candy around my wrist, and it was pulling tighter and tighter as the guy tried to pull it loose. And I'm trying to turn around and kick him because it hurt. And I hear my brother come pounding down the sidewalk, just these little sneakers on the pavement, whap, 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 right? And there he is standing over me going, "That's my sister." And it was like a movie, fist right down next to my face, just launches up into the air. And the next thing I know, we're both covered with blood. And this 14-year-old is screaming at my brother, "You broke my nose! You broke my nose!" Like, and it was, incredibly violent for kids that age, but it was their instinct. It was exactly, and there was an elect, obviously, they made decisions around this, but their primary instinct was, to deal with this, we have to protect, we have to stand up for ourselves. And we're going to minimize the damage that we take by being prepared for it. And that's your fight into fight or flight in a situation where you actually have a moment to think. And that was it. That's nature. That's not nurture. That's not patriarchy. That's not female victimhood. That's masculinity, and it's not toxic.
Yep.
Right? It's benevolent. And in that moment, I learned the lesson that if I was in danger, I was not in danger by myself, because I was always hanging out with boys. So if I endangered myself, I was endangering them too.
Yep.
Women don't seem to understand that lesson today. And in particular, women who grow up in, the girls on the other side of town didn't know any of that shit, right? They didn't have that same situation. If they got into a fight, it was, "You can't come in my yard anymore, and I'm going to tell my mom, and I'm going to tell my dad." And, so they're the girls that would say, "My big brother's going to come and beat you up." Right? Girls in my neighborhood did not say that. We didn't have that luxury. We grew up learning to fight, and we grew up learning that if we fought with a boy, we got our brother into a fight, right? But that's feminist privilege, being the upper middle class, pampered, prissy little tattletale that goes home and gets her brother into a fight.
Yep. All right, so let's go back to the article. I did get a super chat from Senior Sticks for $2, and he says, "Feminists are of the elite. They speak of the elite." And let me just make sure that there's no super chow. Yeah, it's kind of ironic because men make the world really comfortable for women, and then you get feminism from that. Hannah's brother's fist gives us $5 and says, "Your brother is a Giga Chad. Here's $5, one for every finger on his fist." All right.
My brother is a Giga Chad, and thank you for the $5.
Yeah, thank you for the $5. So anyway, From then on, each new development, be it metal weapons, the rise of the state, or even the birth of writing, further entrenched the power of men and the subjugation of women, until now, that is. Patriarchy has declined, according to Jablonka, but men remain caught in pathologies of the masculine, trying to live up to a symbolic role that doesn't reflect their reduced dominance. The result is an almost tragic level of alienation, he writes, and feminists, instead of mocking or dismissing male anguish, thereby leaving men vulnerable to the revanchist fantasies of Tucker Carlson and his ilk, should recognize this moment as a crucial recruitment opportunity. Now is the time to convince men that their obligatory model of virility has immiserated them far more than it has empowered them. The masculinity of domination pays, but it comes at a high cost. An insecure ego, puerile vanity, disinterest in reading, and the life of the mind, atrophied inner life, the narrowing of social opportunities, and to top it all, a diminished life expectancy.
Got to point something out because of the vocabulary word, all right? So revanchism or revanchism, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. I've never heard it pronounced. I've only ever read it before, is a vengeful policy or vengeful attitude. Like you're trying to take it back, right? Yeah. You've lost something and you're trying to take it back. It's revenge. And they're basically saying that if things are taken from men and men object to that and men want it back, that's bad. But this is coming from the same people who say that if you have the same skin color as people who were slaves, even if you didn't have slave ancestors in this country, you are owed payback money. You are owed blood money from people who have the same skin color as people who were slaveholders, the majority of slaveholders, even if they not only didn't have slaveholding ancestors, but have ancestors who were who lost family in the Civil War fighting against the slaveholders, right? So they're a little bit revengist there themselves, but no, it's only revengist or revanchist if you don't like that you're being disenfranchised and disadvantaged under the current regime if you're white and you're male.
When the feminists, okay, so in this article, in this paragraph, the person says that the result is an almost tragic level of alienation, he writes, and feminists, instead of mocking or dismissing male anguish, thereby leaving men vulnerable to the revanchist fantasies of Tucker Carlson and his ilk, should recognize this moment as a crucial recruitment opportunity. That's probably one of the most important sentences in this paragraph, because what they're saying is, firstly, they're trying to convince us that feminists actually won't mock or dismiss male anguish. That is absolute bullshit. Like, we know that they delight in seeing men suffer. If there are men who are lonely, and there's a lot of that going around, there are men who are suffering. If there are men who don't know, who basically lack direction and they need help, they don't care about them. And they're claiming that they do. She's literally lying right to our face when she says, instead of mocking, and then she claims that
well, she's giving advice there. Don't mock them. Do this instead. Use the opportunity.
But
well, yeah, nobody's going to take that advice if they're already mocking men.
Yeah, and then
they're not
they
doing
say,
it because they
right. And then they say, well, this is what's going to cause people like Tucker Carlson, who they vaguely suggest is like evil, and he's going to use men as some kind of weapon against feminism or leftism or whatever. That's what they're suggesting. And then they're saying, but we should be recruiting these men. So they want broken men that they can convince or gaslight into thinking that feminism did not create their problems, and it's not responsible for the lack of sympathy that they get and the lack of support that they get. And then they want to take that, make those men hate masculinity, because when they talk about toxic masculinity, they're not talking about a specific list of masculine qualities that have the capacity to become toxic. They're just talking about men. It's just masculinity in general. And so they say Tucker Carlson is an example of toxic masculinity. He is your enemy. And then those men go to, the men that they recruit become essentially self-hating, anti-masculine men that serve as useful idiots to their agenda, which is what they want. So they're literally talking about recruiting broken men to use them as weapons. At least that's what I think.
Basically, yeah. And that's actually how terrorists are created. That is, if you look at groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda and all of the various different groups throughout history, back when the KKK was more powerful, it's always men who are in that situation already, and somebody comes along and says, well, we can make your life better, we can save you from this situation, and we can get back at the people that inflicted this on you. And
that's literally how Islamic terrorists recruit guys in prison.
Yep.
So they literally do that. And here's another thing too. When an incel, or someone that the media has decided to call an incel, but we'll just say for the sake of argument, let's say an incel, when an incel shoots up a school because, he's suicidal, he's misanthropic, he's angry at the world, he feels like his life is going nowhere, he has no chance of living a normal life, making any friends, whatever it is, right? He's completely cut off from society and he resents society for it. When an incel does that, does the story around that, the way that our discussion of that incident, when that gets out, who benefits from that? Do men's rights activists benefit from that, or do feminists benefit from that?
Yeah, obviously, that makes a huge difference as to who promotes it. And what ends up happening is we never get the whole story. We never find out the background and everything, because they're able to use that to demonize men. And they never do talk about, here's how this person got to that point. Here's what was done to them. Here's how they reacted to it. Here is all the opportunities that existed to help him find a better path. Here's where, and when we're now learning in a lot of these cases, here's where the FBI that was aware of them this whole time stepped in and tried to entrap them and lost control, and the crime was actually committed instead of them getting a chance to stop it and then tell everybody, look, we stopped a crime.
Yeah.
But and of course, but it's all my patriarchy.
Well, but narratively, feminists benefit. Because they benefit huge, because if an incel loses it, he shoots up a school or whatever, a restaurant, a mall, a subway, the feminists will, it basically falls in line with all of their little talking points. So obviously they can make the case of patriarchy, white male rage, if the guy's race fits, sometimes it's not a white guy, but they'll make it fit if they can. Because he could be a light-skinned Latino and they'll just say it's white. They will use the gun argument because feminists are all gun grabbers. They will use any number of other basically leftist talking points to cram as much in there as possible. And the fact is, the shooting did happen, so it's not like you can deny it. But they never talk about the root cause. They don't look into the history of that individual and all of the ways in which the systems have failed him, because that's not the most important thing. They just want to be able to blame it on patriarchy, to blame it on toxic masculinity, to blame it on men, to blame it on guns, to blame it on white people, to blame it on cops, to blame it on whatever, and because those are the things they want control over narratively. And I think that a decent MRA just wants to help that man way before he gets to the point where he's ready to shoot up a school and then kill himself. Like we want to intervene or see changes that will minimize the odds of that happening. And that means that if the things that we want are working, then no one sees the results, because then there's fewer shootings. And if there's fewer shootings, there's nothing you can point to and say, we're responsible for that, right? So like you can't take credit for things that aren't happening, even if you might have contributed to a conversation that prevented it, because you may never learn about it, you know? And so like, this is what I guess what I'm getting at ultimately is that feminists want men to self-destruct. They want men to lose control. They want men to want to lash out in the world, because every time that happens, it supports their assertions about the world. And they use it to make more money and get more power and restrict our freedoms even more. So there is the unfortunate reality that, you know, we're sort of dealing with. Anyway, back to the article, I guess. So they're talking about all this alienation again, and that's what they're using, is they're basically saying when these men lash out, it's because of Tucker Carlson, it's because of toxic masculinity. It's what they're saying though. And the thing is that like if you look at what Tucker Carlson has said about men, like it's like purple pilled. So it's not, I say that there's definitely some things that he has taken notice of and talked about. And for a conservative commentator, I'll take it. I'll take it and say, thank you, keep doing it, right? Like, I'm not going to like fucking look a gift horse in the mouth. If he's going to do it, he's going to do it. But even his mild as fuck approach to talking about men makes him a demon in the eyes of these people. Because, and what does that mean? That means that people like us are far more dangerous to them. The only thing that's missing is that, I guess, if our profile was bigger, you know, please smash the like button so maybe more people will see this. And then we would really be a threat, okay? But like, it doesn't really matter, because as long as we're discussing these things, the word gets out, someone else says it somewhere else, and then it picks up. I mean, think about it. Cassie J made her movie based on Paul's website, A Voice for Men, right? She was going to make a giant hit piece, like slamming the men's movement and everything. She was ready to destroy us. And because she happened to be a person of some integrity, she decided to give it an actual fair shot, and like it changed everything. And people have seen this movie. So, you know, but like that is ultimately just PR for us, which isn't bad, you know, and she's also made people aware of some real issues that can't really be denied. I mean, feminists try to blame it on men, but it's not deniable as an issue. And their evidence that it's men's fault, men are suffering, it doesn't hold any water anyway. And so like, I guess if it can happen to Cassie, and then she can have an effect, and then later you see Tucker Carlson make a series of shows on Fox News talking about those same issues, regardless of what you think about Fox News, that's not relevant. The fact is, he's saying it. If it was someone on MSNBC, I'd be giving them the same credit. But let's be real, that's never going to happen. MSNBC will never do it, because they have an interest in holding on to the feminist version of reality and using it, right? This is why they hate Tucker so much. He's spoken up in defense of men. Josh Hawley has spoken up in defense of men. He has been just dragged through the mud. Why is that the real like kicker for these people? Why is a man speaking up for men, or even women speaking up for men? Why is that the real kicker? Because there's something there, something really significant, probably something more significant than anything else that we're talking about in our public discourse. And they hate it because they know that that's the keystone that'll take the whole thing down.
Because it highlights their apathy. It highlights their complete apathy for men.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, they see men as labor stock. Honestly, they think men should be working for women. That's what they think, serving them, just not as human beings.
Right.
Yeah. So
they're human doings. And as long as you all just keep in line and stay doing for us, that's what they want.
Yep. Ugh. All right. So anyway, let's go back to the article. Let me see. Yeah, so they're talking about how, men have diminished life expectancy. Again, they're willing to do the work that shortens their life, I guess. So feminism has been slow to empathize and collaborate with men, Jablonka claims, because too many in the movement remain wedded to a Manchian worldview of male oppressors and female victims. Oh, so this is actually potentially going to challenge that notion. Some feminists, I mean, don't hold your breath, guys. We're not there yet. But some feminists are unreconstructed leftist types who reject any evidence of women's progress as mystification designed to hide the persistence of male domination. That's just sort of regular feminism, guys, really. Others are duped by a pro-women romanticism into believing that women are innately nicer and more progressive than men. Jablonka rejects this sort of essentialist thinking, which he says provides a spurious biological rationale for traditional gender roles. Can't be a biological determinist. That's patriarchy. I mean, oppressive. If women are naturally kinder and more nurturing than men, and if men are intrinsically imbued with a culture of rape, why bother trying to change the status quo? Testosterone and other androgens may have something to do with a male propensity for aggression, he concludes. That's not true.
That's been debunked.
Yeah, it's been debunked. That testosterone is about cooperation, not aggression. Yeah. In fact, estrogen is associated with aggression. Male propensity for aggression, he concedes, but human beings are hostage neither to their biology nor their gender. Men's history of brutish behavior is the product of patriarchal culture, and only by insisting on the fundamental identity between men and women can feminism realize its proper aim, a redistribution of gender in which new masculinities abound and the selection of any given way of being a man becomes a lifestyle choice. So they want to redistribute gender. They want to socialize gender. They want to make gender like commies want to make resources. And then they think, oh, we're going to find a bunch of extra new masculinities. And then men will be able to share in all of those masculinities. But that doesn't actually include masculinity, does it?
But see, this is the thing. He just accepts the idea that men are intrinsically imbued with a culture of rape, and says, why bother trying to change the status quo? And he accepts the idea without questioning it that men are biologically predisposed to be violent and aggressive and not recognize other people's boundaries, but doesn't provide any evidence. So again, we're looking, and then uses it as evidence as why it's important for us to develop new masculinities within feminism, and guided by feminism. And again, it's we're looking at drivel in one of the formerly most respected publications in the United States. It's actually heartbreaking to see this as a former journalist and like now a commentator. Like it really is heartbreaking to see this. Yeah. It's like watching one of your grandparents go through senile dementia, and like, because I've done that, and it's sad.
Yeah, and how can you claim that after we redistribute gender, which they're not even explaining, it sounds like pie in the sky stuff, there will be new masculinities abounding, and it will give men a lifestyle choice. But if you can't identify masculinity as a starting point, how can you claim that any of this other stuff is possible? And you don't even accept masculinity as the way most people do. In fact, you intentionally give us a terrible definition, or at least you associate it with things that are not associated with it, like aggression. And then and testosterone, right? Well, that is associated with it, but it doesn't do the thing that they claim it does. And then after that, you basically say, well, we need to essentially like move into new masculinity. But what that means is you can be whatever you want, but you can't be masculine, because that's the bad masculinity. Well, then what's left? This is the thing that they're trying to make us believe it's a new masculine, but it's not. It's just feminine, because there's no other option. And that's, if you look at the men, male feminist types, soy boys, whatever you want to call it, people in the queer space, all of the men are just varying levels of feminine,
right?
And they're doing
it's not just
it's
not just femininity, it's the dysfunctional into femininity. And the best comparison I can give you just off the top of my head is I can't remember the nickname everybody gave him, but the soy boy that got into the argument with a pro-lifer.
Oh, and then roundhouse
kicked her, and then claimed he was just trying to kick her phone. And what happened there was he got into an argument with another person, and she asked him a question that challenged his narrative, and he couldn't come up with an answer that preserved his narrative, and he resorted to violence.
Yep.
That's the femininity we're going to get in men.
Yep.
So it's not going to, like, they're gonna claim femininity is a cure for the problem of male violence, when in actuality, femininity is just going to cause male violence to happen under different circumstances.
Yeah.
It's going to turn male violence into female violence.
Yep.
In men.
Yep. The guy, we all call him Cuck Norris.
That's it. Yeah. You're right. Cuck Norris.
Cuck Norris. So yeah, that is exactly right. In fact, that's kind of what has happened with the gang culture in the urban and inner city areas, where there's like high numbers of blacks and Latinos, and the men, they grow up without fathers, but they are trying to like understand their masculinity, but because they've never been around other men, who are grown and can be good role models, and they themselves had fathers. So like most of the guys in these neighborhoods don't know their fathers at all. So they're all like looking to each other, as peers to help them understand that. And those men have low impulse control, because one of the things that a dad teaches you is self-control, is, like when to do something and when not to, right? And the appropriate usage of force. But they don't have that. So if they get into an altercation or a beef with some other guy, then it could easily escalate to murder. Because there's nothing holding them back. There's no training wheels. There's no father to step in and say, look, you guys need to work this out another way. All they know is, I'm going to prove that I'm dominant. And sometimes that's just going to be a fight. But sometimes it might not be. It might be fatal, because look at how women fight, right?
I was talking about this with Hothead Studios actually in chat, because the guys were talking about the need for men to band together again, because men doing things with other men has been so demonized by women in society for the last century that men are not allowed to have groups to support each other and band together, right? And he was joking about, oh, you mean like joining a gang? And I thought, well, wait a minute, actually it's funny, but it's not funny, because the funny thing about it is gangs happen because why? Progressive feminist interference with masculine mentorship. You take the father out of the home, you take the men out of the schools, you take all of the male mentorship away from little boys, and they will replace it with something else. The consequence of the void is, you've had something essential to your development as a child, development into your adulthood, taken away from you. You will seek to replace it with the best of equivalent that you can substitute for it, even if that equivalent is completely dysfunctional. So they'll create their own male, quote, safe space by banding together with each other against like the outsiders from other neighborhoods, the bad kids in their neighborhoods that pick on each other. The example of that being like my brother and our friend banding together against the high schoolers that were going to mug us for our candy. They immediately, like, they're friends, right? But they immediately were back-to-back allies in that moment. And if we'd have had other kids on the street with us at the moment when that happened, instead of kids warning us, go home, these guys are going to get you. If they would have all banded together, even if it were kids, that had been in fights with each other at the park. They would have banded together against the high schoolers just because they were the threat in the moment. And so you end up in this situation where now you have the boys in the neighborhood looking to older boys and looking to the toughest and the strongest and the most successful in the endeavor of maintaining a gang structure in that neighborhood. And all of the crime that comes out of that, all of the violence that comes out of that because they are trying to establish a level of security in their own environment and a level of resource acquisition in their own environment. It is all just human instinct manifesting in the most functional way it can after the wrecking ball of politics came in and took out the most functional way available to humans to do that.
Yep. All right. So let us continue. But yeah, like the thing with men, gangland men, they're basically learning about masculinity through their peers. They are starting from the position of being raised by single mothers who are more likely to beat them. And then they are looking around their community to take essentially points or pointers about how to be a man from the women of their generation. And those women who have also been raised without fathers, they're becoming sexually active much earlier. And so they're basically perpetuating a terrible cycle. And masculinity is not to be found there. But because the people involved, the people in gangs are men, and those men are, attacking, beating up, or even murdering other men, feminists can point at that and blame it on masculinity because on the surface, that's what it looks like. But it's not. That is literally dysfunctional. And it's because of things that feminists have done. Policy and behavior and cultural impact and the actions of single mothers who may or may not be feminists, but it doesn't matter because they're serving their interests. So when gangbangers murder each other, feminists benefit because they get to say that's masculinity. And people don't know how to argue against it because they see a man killing another man. It's literally like Joe Rogan. When Joe Rogan talked about how he has this joke that he tells where he says, I can't stand these men's rights guys, right? And he has this bit that he does where he says, MRAs will say that, men get raped more if you include prison rape. And Joe will say, yeah, but they get raped by other men. And that's the punchline. So what is Joe saying? He's saying, well, as long as men are being raped by other men, it doesn't count. Like, it literally doesn't count. But like, why are men raping other men in prison? Like, what's the common denominator outside of their gender that is causing men to rape men in prison? I bet it has something to do with single motherhood. But see, Joe thinks that's hilarious. And if it was true, it might be, but it's not true because it's not the whole story. And so and it also exposes his own misandry because when he says rape only matters if the rapist that's raping a man is not a man, right? If the rapist is a man, well then the rapist man cancels out the rape victim man, and now we don't have anything to complain about. So it's really stupid. It's completely tone deaf, and he doesn't seem to see that what he's making a joke about is something that harms and traumatizes men. Like if you go to jail because of fucking, too many parking tickets or tax evasion and you get ass raped in prison, is that hilarious? I mean, I could see like someone who was like, like someone who was molesting children or doing something really awful. I could see someone making a joke about it. But even then, it's like, getting raped in prison is not actually part of the prison sentence. Like, that kind of shit shouldn't be happening anyway. But of course, again, he has no sympathy. He doesn't even see that it doesn't make sense. So, this is kind of what we're up against. All right. To claim that masculinity is a patriarchal construct, however, is not so much an explanation as the postponement of an explanation. Who or what created the patriarchy? Evolutionary. I like how you're just going to assume that this is real. So now we're going to speculate on where it came from. Nobody's going to say, well, what? The patriarchy isn't real, guys. Evolutionary biologists maintain that our earliest male ancestors had an evolutionary incentive to maximize the spread of their genes by violently competing for and monopolizing access to women. Jablonka is eager to avoid such biological imperatives, but in doing so, he reaches for a kind of just so story that renders much of the history he has laid out beside the point. Patriarchy, he speculates, was motivated by simple resentment of women's wombs.
Oh my God.
Deprived of the power that women have, men reserved all the others for themselves, he writes. This was the revenge of the males. Their biological inferiority led to their social hegemony.
So basically, any situation in history where men protected women from as much risk and as much adversity as they possibly could, while preserving their culture, their community, their family, whatever, their ability to obtain and maintain a source of resources, right? To be able to feed themselves and provide themselves with water and stay safe and not get eaten by bears or whatever. That's patriarchy, and women are victims of it, even though men are the ones dying for it, and women are the ones who fare better in society because of it. Women are victims of doing better than men, in other words, right? So the only two potential reasons that men might do this is to create dependence that they are also going to have to protect and feed and provide water for, and protect from the elements as well as the rest of nature, or because they're angry at women for being able to create dependence. It couldn't possibly be that there's any such thing as emotion involved, love and camaraderie and companionship and intimacy and all of the things that happen in families. And it couldn't possibly be that men value women as companions and men value their families as a safe haven and a place where they are loved and cared for, and they want to protect those people that are related to them. And it can't possibly be that this is a holdover from natural instinct that you see manifesting in animals all over the world. No, it's got to be malicious, because men are evil by nature, and masculinity is by nature malicious, and therefore bad men. Shame on you. That's the feminist narrative in a nutshell, right there.
That's what they're doing. And of course, because again, they say that men are violently competing for and monopolizing access to women. Because those women, they don't choose the most high status men. They're not trying to pick the top 1%, right? Which is what women do. And I think it's what women have always done. And I think it's the reason why men compete for status. And but the problem with that is that it basically says women also make choices, and they can't allow that. But also, men are inferior and women are superior, but men have managed to create a patriarchy despite their inferiority. So
yeah,
Thus it is that and I think I'm gonna go for, because I gotta go pick up. Okay. All right, we're back. We're back, guys. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm gonna reopen Zoom and send out the invitation again, I think. So just give me a second. Oh, it's reconnecting me now. All right, I'm back. I think. Hello?
Hello.
You guys hear me? Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know.
You
what
dropped
happened.
out.
Yeah, my internet or my connection dropped for a moment.
Oh, okay.
I'm back, so no worries. All right. Anyway, I'll just go ahead and finish the paragraph. Sorry about that. Not that Jablonka thinks that there is only one eternal masculine style. Rather, all models of masculinity since antiquity have been mechanisms for asserting and imposing patriarchal power. The extroversion and swagger of the toreador look very different from the gallantry of the Victorian gentleman, which is in turn quite distinct from the laconic glamour of the cowboy, but they are all equally culpable expressions of the masculine superiority complex. Jablonka's desire to trace all of the world's hierarchies, injustices, and conflicts back to one prehistoric fit of reproductive jealousy leads to a good deal of muddle as things proceed. One of his more bizarre and ahistorical claims is that the masculine hegemony has deemed four masculine types inferior: the Jew, the loser, the black, and the homosexual. So this guy is really trying to connect masculinity with white supremacy and other like, far right. It is, of course, impossible to explain the historical oppression of poor people, black people, gays, and Jews entirely in terms of gender politics, and in trying to do so, Jablonka has to make any number of ludicrous assertions, including that white men enslaved black men in part because they considered them feminine and non-virile. The book's cocky bid for comprehensiveness proves to be its undoing. So she basically disagrees with this, and I mean, I think it's obvious that that's ridiculous, but do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's a few things here. Like, first of all, the idea of extroversion and swagger being a masculine thing because there are examples of it in masculinity is absolute bullshit. If you look at women's display of the privilege of being able to wear clothing that restricts their ability to move, or that makes them vulnerable to attack, makes them vulnerable to the elements, and so on. All of that stuff is also extroversion and swagger. I would argue that putting yourself on display is extroversion, and assuming that there will be no consequences for putting yourself on display is absolutely swagger. And yet that's a different style of swagger, but it's extroversion and swagger. Women jousting socially over popularity and male attention, and the ability to intimidate other women, or the ability to manipulate other women as their own private army. That's extroversion and swagger as well. But it only counts when men do it, right?
Yep.
Gallantry, women engaging in charitable activities, women engaging in charitable activism, and so on, is also gallantry. Women volunteering to take care of people who have been injured and to provide food and clothing and things for people who are down on their luck. That is gallantry. That is the gallantry of the Victorian lady, right? But oh no, you can't talk about that kind of gallantry. It's not masculine. It's feminine. So therefore, only men do this. We have to ignore it when women do it, right? But all of that, even if all of that, you take all that in consideration, the idea that it's different between the sexes, how it manifests. Jablonka's conclusions are not just ludicrous. There has to be a word that has a greater level of ridiculousness than ludicrousness.
I used to use the term ricoculous.
It is just insane.
Yeah. I say ricoculous. What I think.
Well, it is, you know, but in any case, this idea that it's about reproductive jealousy, or even the idea that it's about access to women. Women do the same things, and they're not doing it for access to women, so it's not about access to women. And you know, that's bullshit. And then when you get into the, I agree that these claims about the 4 inferior masculine types, you know, labeled inferior masculine types, that is ahistorical and bizarre. And at the other end of it, there have been instances where you know, people have deemed these people less valuable. They're not unmasculine, but men in particular who were Jewish, men who were the losers, the poor, and so on, men who were Black and men who were homosexual have been abused in our society on levels that women from any group, there's not been women from any group that has experienced it on that same level. And the one reason why a lot of women and children were killed during the Holocaust was because they were so used to, the Jews were so used to the men being targeted first, that they got the men out of Germany thinking that they would have time to get the women and children out later. But the men were in greater danger, and the Nazis were more, I don't know, they were less discriminatory, gender discriminatory in who they were and were not going to kill. They just killed everybody. Yeah. So the women and children ended up dying. So they were surprised by this. It was an abnormality for the women and children to be targeted. So it is true that there have been 4 masculine types that have been targeted in our society, but not because they were less masculine. They're demonized as more threatening men and as a threat to the women of the societies that are targeting them. That the men of the societies that are targeting them have to protect those women from those bad. Usually they'll be portrayed as rapey. Gay men are portrayed as misogynistic. That they don't do anything for women, and therefore they're bad. Right? They're perverse because they don't dedicate their lives to the care and maintenance of a woman. So it's not a patriarchy. It's not it's not a rulership of men that does that. It's a subjugation of men that does that to women's interests. So it's just, I don't know if there's a name for the opposite of a patriarchy would be whatever you would call the enslavement of men.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's like narratives that are used that require people to have enough misandry to accept those narratives, like that, you know, Jewish men are a danger to, you know, your Aryan women, for example. So you would have to, like, they can only make that claim because enough people find that it's, you know, that it could be true based on what they know about men. Not necessarily what they know about Jews, but what they know about men. And they do the same thing with any other kind of man. And we have, I think that we're, you know, maybe evolved to sort of like accept that as a you know, as a starting point where these other things can happen. But yeah, it's that's what I believe in. So I think we gotta call it, because I gotta go pick up the wife. So let me just double check to make sure that there's no other super chats. All right, I don't see anything. Senior Sticks, maybe he did send this one, I didn't read it. Sends us $2 and says, which masculinity, elite or everyone else? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. Which masculinity, elite or everyone else? But well, I appreciate the donation nonetheless. So do you guys have any final thoughts or anything before I end the show?
I think, are we going to continue with this?
We
Is
could.
there very much? I think we should.
Yeah, let's go through the whole thing. There's like probably 2 more shows worth out of it.
Yeah, because there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, and I think that they have a lot of well, it's actually kind of interesting that there is maybe a little bit of a divide here amongst like what some feminists have written about and what some are responding to. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you know, we're basically looking at the aliens and the predators fighting, and we don't want either of them to win, but it's interesting nonetheless. So let us know what you guys think about this in the comments section. I look forward to seeing your thoughts on everything. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, as I was saying before, and most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you to Lauren and Hannah for coming on the show, and we will talk to you all in the next one. So next Thursday, we're going to do part 3 of this. I think there is like more that we can like dig through. So see you guys then.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.